been a real key issue for this committee for ever since we started back in 2018. We did a comprehensive review, and this is our opportunity to see how it's been made. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is to say notice of recording webcasts broadcast by the council. You can record photographs except when there are confidential or exempt items. Apologies.
Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Mackie, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Clements, Councillor Harmer, Councillor Brown.
Okay. Some of them are listening in online.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear to those that are watching online, obviously we're in quorum, so the meeting will proceed forward.
Yeah, and we can ratify any, make any, we can ratify them later on the next meeting. Okay, declarations of interest, just to remind you that you must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting, and if you do have one, you must not speak or take part, and declarations will be recorded in minutes. Action notes of the meeting on the 21st of January, are people broadly happy with those? Yeah.
But again, Chair, they'll need to go to the next meeting.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Christian. Complaint service update. To consider the attached report from Wendy Griffiths and to consider input from Deborah. So I don't know how it's going to happen. You're going to start off, Deborah? Yeah.
Chair.
Yes. Off you go. Thank you for coming.
No, it's my pleasure, and thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk to you about my personal commitment actually to this part of the improvement of the council, which is, as I see it, fundamental. So the first thing I would say is that I feel really privileged to be Chief Executive of this organisation. However, I was just saying I feel more resolute every day about the need to improve the services that we deliver to our residents. And I've spent the last couple of months promoting the city and working with others to raise the reputation of the city, because that's really important, I think, for us as a council. And what I would say is that, you know, there is global interest in Birmingham as a place to come and invest and put roots down. We're seeing clear evidence of that with organisations like Goldman Sachs, HSBC, Scotland Commonwealth Games, HS2. I won't belabor that because you've heard all about that over the last number of months. But actually it does give a clear message that Birmingham as a place is a place where people want to come and invest and work and live and play. And as a city council, we need to be able to respond to that by giving good quality services. The first thing that I'm absolutely clear on is that the residents of this city deserve nothing less than the best. And certainly myself and the core leadership team are absolutely focused on that. And good customer service has got to build trust, credibility and improvement, and a sense of improvement for our citizens. And, you know, what I say to staff is that residents pay their council tax. There is a deal here. They pay their council tax, they expect a good service, and as officers that work in this council, we should be focused on delivering that services to our residents. And I know many of you over lockdown will have used other organisations like Amazon, Spotify, you know, all those services that are digitised. And I know how irritated I was when I ordered, I won't tell you why I ordered, because it'll give you an indication of my lockdown experience. But you know, there was a commitment, wasn't there, about, you know, you can have one click, you can have your service delivered within 24 hours and stuff. So that was my expectation. So I know how it feels, as many of you do on this call, when, you know, there are expectations that are not met, and what that then makes you feel about that organisation. So it's not just about the services that we give, but it's also about how we ensure that those services are informed in terms of performance information and in terms of, you know, the level of complaints that we get about those services. So what we're here today to discuss is customer services, the improvements that we're putting in terms of the process, but I'd also like to spend a little bit of time also talking about the quality as well. So it's not just having a good process, and that's not going to be enough if residents are making contact with the council, we don't respond to them in time, the quality of our response is not great, but also the way in which we treat our residents aren't right as well. And it's as basic as the tone of the letters and the emails that we send in response. So that is just as important to me as having a slick process that works. I'd also like to put this within the context of the broader transformation and improvement of the council. So you know we have a clear transformation process. We now have a very clear medium-term financial plan, so we're thinking really carefully about the money and the resources that we have and how best to deploy those resources. And we've also now got a guiding North Star, which is a draft corporate plan that will be finalised post-May. But that is a plan that very clearly identifies the grand challenges that this council, that this city are experiencing, and also gives a clear indication about what we need to do in order to meet those challenges as well. So we now have a very clear approach to what we need to do, how we need to do it, and the resources that we need to do, that we have at hand to deploy to meet those challenges facing this city. So our approach to customer services is also going through a transformation as well. And Peter and Wendy and others are on this call to take you through the detail. But what I would say is I have never worked with members of staff who are so resolute and are so committed to making this customer services delivery the best that it possibly can be. And one of the things that you should be confident about is that whilst we're doing something that's going to work for Birmingham and Birmingham City Council, we're also very open to seeing good performance and best performance nationally and indeed globally, and trying to bring that experience back into the city as well. So I'd like to take this opportunity, and I mean, I get it, to just thank Peter and Wendy for what they're doing. It's not right yet, and we're certainly not coming to this meeting to say, job done, and we've now got a beautifully formed approach to managing customer complaints and our engagement with customers. But what we are coming to this committee to talk to you about is some of the green shoots of improvement, but also a very honest and acknowledgement that we've still got a long way to go. So the new customer strategy is rooted in commitments and promises to citizens, and this is really important. And again, this is not saying that we're there yet, but I think it's very clear for us to state what our commitment and promise to those citizens in this city are. So the first one is we need to be better connected to the community and faith groups. We do need to be committed to fast tracking our decisions and responses. We need to know what customers need, and that should be about us being able to do that without customers asking. So that's about, are we really capturing all the, the intelligence that you as councillors gain from the work that you do in your wards adequately. I know that the ward visits that I'm doing, the constituency visits, and I'm doing one this afternoon, I know that it's the rich data and intelligence I get from those ward visits, spending time with councillors and MPs, is really important for me to feed back into the council so we can understand how it feels on the streets for those residents who are experiencing our services. So we need to know what customers need, but we also need to be able to demonstrate that we can respond to that. So tell us once, all of those of you who've sadly lost loved ones through COVID will know how traumatic it is to have to kind of engage with the council and have to tell the council the same thing time and time again. So we are really focused on tell us once, and we will then take that and we will deal with it internally without you having to kind of tell us again. Customer-driven innovation, very often the answers to the problems come from residents themselves. So we're really keen to ensure that residents have the opportunity to work with us to kind of help us deliver that innovation that needs to be delivered. This week, I spent time with the Parent Carers Forum, we're looking at the improvement that needs to happen with the SEND service, and they are committed to co-producing the improvements with us. We need to do more of that. And then early intervention where possible. I'd love us to be in a position where the level of complaints is minimal. No, that is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen within the next number of months, and I dare say it's going to take a number of years for us to get to that point. But actually, the only way we can do that is intervening earlier to stop people complaining in the first place. And Chair, what I would like to talk about is my personal commitment. As Chief Exec of this organisation, I need to be absolutely committed to working with officers to improve this service. The customer service work was commissioned and approved by Cabinet on the 14th of December last year. This is a kind of a pit stop, if you like, where we can share with you the improvements and the changes that we've made since December. And I would also suggest through you, Chair, that we continue to have these pit stops, if you want to call them, with this committee, so we can continuously kind of report back how we're improving.
We have talked about how that reporting mechanism will work. We wanted to come to this committee, but we also wanted to go to all elected members.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to be debated regularly at city council meetings, so that senior officers, if they're on a, what do you call it, a journey, that we can help you get there a little bit quicker than you otherwise would. And I think that glare of publicity from members and members of the public will focus everybody's mind. That's my view.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's really important is that as part of my personal commitment, it's not just about having a brilliantly, beautifully formed customer services process. And it's not enough for the organisation to simply respond to the complaints. If we are getting lots of complaints about a particular service, what's that telling us? And how are we as an organisation saying, actually, there's a big warning sign here that's telling us that part of this organisation and the services aren't as good as they need to be. So I, with members of the corporate leadership team, are putting in place a process for root cause analysis. And so we're going to use the rich data and intelligence coming out of the customer services process to inform the work that I and members of the corporate leadership team need to do in order to improve services. So we know there is a problem with mislinkage. And madness, madness is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So for me, we need to do something completely different to the way in which we deal with mislinks, for example. So the root cause analysis is something that the corporate leadership team are now going to take on and are now going to kind of understand what the data is saying and therefore what we need to do in order to review and change some of those policies. There's also an issue about cultural behaviours. We've got a very clear list of values. Now, values will only be values unless you can demonstrate that you're putting those in practice by the way in which you behave. So there's a big organisational piece of work being done at the moment around behavioural change and introducing a different culture. Chair, I worked here many years ago, and I worked with you and other colleagues in the constituency, and I have seen a real change in the behaviour of some of the staff now from when it was before. And that's got to change, it's not good enough. So the way in which we behave as internally in an organisation, but more importantly externally as well, is really important to me. And if we can't get that behavioural change shift, it's going to make it more and more difficult to make the improvements in services that we need to make as well. So we're also doing work around communications as well. So I don't want people to think it's all doom and gloom, because it's not, because there are absolute flashes of brilliance in this organisation, that we are not being that we are not promoting enough and communicating enough. So the way in which we communicate, not just the poor performance, but the really great performance is just as important to me as well. And that drives, better kind of trust in the organisation as well, if we can demonstrate that we're doing some really great stuff as well. Performance culture is really important to me as well. Councillor Clancy, you know that when I came to the Conservative group, I talked about the importance of managing our performance, and it's about embedding that in the organisation. So the way in which I'm holding the directors to account is going to change, and complaints, the root cause analysis will form part of the appraisal that I have with the directors on a 6-monthly basis as well. It's a much clearer strategic planning process, but actually it's not just about what we do, it's how we do it as well. So directors are expected to drive this behavioural change through their directorates, to manage that cultural change, but also to demonstrate how all of that is delivering more better services and improved service delivery as well. At the heart of that has got to be putting customers first. They pay our wages, they pay their council tax, they expect nothing less. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Wendy or Peter, do you want to add anything that has been said?
I don't think so. It's just really refreshing to have that support strategically, as well as here later on operationally, how we started to use the data to really shape the changes that we're making to try and drive that improvement. So it's really starting to come into its own now in terms of the improvement programmes at a directorate level that get fed in every month to make sure, and as I said, you see when I hand over to Darren, we've got an update on the position for complaints. I don't know if you want me to lead straight into that now. Or
This is the members' complaints or everything.
yeah, so it's an update, just an update.
I think it would actually be useful because we'll know how Darren's bit of the council is performing. Refuse will be number one, I guess. I'm not a magician, but I'm guessing, looking at my own email inbox. Yeah, go on then.
And I think, to be fair, there is. We know where this started was that we didn't have that visibility across the scale and volume of complaint activity that was happening across the council. And, you alluded to earlier the overview and scrutiny report, which has been really helpful in getting the prioritisation that we needed organisationally to make the changes. I won't cover the background because that it started from this group, but ultimately some of the issues that we had in advance of having that centralised system, that we had, high volumes of complaints, but we didn't necessarily know how bad that was because a lot of this activity went straight into services and directorates, so we didn't get the root cause analysis necessarily out because it was quite often lost. We had different levels of resources, lots of people not getting responses at all, things going into sort of a black hole and didn't know where or who was leading with that complaint. And quite often there was no learning from complaints. So we have multiple entry points, 4 or 5 different systems, and a real sort of lack of organisation in terms of how we get a real grip on learning on the data. So just to update on what we've achieved so far. So we know we've now moved to a single system. So it's a single system as much as people actually use that system. We've developed a robust process, and you'll see from Darren's presentation, of what we do with the data now that it's visible to us and how we can translate that down to reward or service, to a particular, even down to a crew level or a road level if we need to, in terms of where we need to focus our effort. We've seen considerable reductions in the backlog. So when we started this process, the backlog stood at about 2,215 complaints that hadn't been touched for a number of months. That backlog is now down to, as of last week, 863, but that also includes the activity that came that week. And so on average, we've reduced that backlog down, almost to a zero position. We've introduced additional staff. So we have dedicated teams based in directorates, and we've seen a 47% reduction in repeat complaints. So that's really important, because what that means is that the learning is happening in terms of.
Can I just say, housing options? I was waiting months for some replies. I put a Sunday evening, I did one. I got a response back on Monday, which illustrates, I don't know whether because they know I'm chair of this committee, because I did have a talk with the director of housing at Labour Group once, and I think maybe where they said make sure that he or she, whoever's keeping it up. I like to think it's across the board, and I hope to God it is. But yeah, so my own personal experience is housing has improved dramatically.
But we're embedding it at every level. That's the important bit. But I still think we've got a lot of work to do on the AGs and actual issue. But ultimately, we don't want them to complain.
No,
you want to be right in the first place.
Yeah, but housing options aren't really complaints; they're frustration at the lack of housing, basically.
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
So it's good to hear, and as Peter alluded to, this is about working collectively. So it's not just the complaints team that can fix this. It's not just the directorate that can fix this. We have a lot of cross-cutting complaints that cut across multiple services. It's about drawing the right people in to get those solutions. We have seen a 20% reduction in the number of ombudsman complaints being upheld, which is really positive. Again, so that means that learning being embedded, responding to an ombudsman complaint. The key is to not have escalations to the ombudsman. If we're dealing with the process correctly, we wouldn't get there. And we have seen an improvement of up to 63% of members' inquiries. And the next few slides just talk you through the volumes. So it's not all bad. We are receiving compliments as well, which are now being recorded. So for the Q3, we had 168 compliments. 57 of those alone were in December. So again, that's feeding that really positive activity back into the services and learning from where we're getting it right. There are other services that can benefit from that. And equally with comments, which is a really interesting increase. We've seen a considerable increase in the number of comments that people are making. So people aren't complaining, but your point about may not be happy with the process or the way something has been handled. They don't want to complain about it, but they want to tell us about their experience so that we can learn from that and help shape those processes moving forward. This slide is really, really key. So what this shows you, and I will draw you right to the sort of bottom right of this to start with. If you look at the Q3 position for 2020 and the Q3 position for 2021, it's really stark in terms of there is what clearly is visibly an increase in the visibility around complaints. So this time last year, we were handling 3,585 complaints. Q3 this year, we were dealing with 7,214 through the complaints teams. So although we put additional resources in to manage that capacity, what we can't be assured of is that a genuine increase, or actually is it better visibility reporting? And it will be a mix of both. So it doesn't necessarily mean organisationally getting worse, but what it does mean is that we've got much better handling visibility over the volume of complaints.
There's no hiding places, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. So whereas this went into services directly and we couldn't learn when we were getting it wrong, we quite often repeat that failure. What we've seen as a result of the increase is that reduction in the volume of repeat complaints. So that gives us a good indication that that learning is being embedded. And what you can also see, and this sort of supports the view that you've just raised really, Chair, is that if you look at the quarter trend for city housing, digital and customer services and partnership insights and prevention, this is the first quarter that we've started to see a reduction in volume in terms of housing for the first time, showing a reduction in volume of complaints. And again, some of that could be attributed to that embedding that learning and making sure we're resolving issues. But the other bit to caveat that with is some of this is seasonal variation. So as we hit, certain peaks in the year, so, October to December, generally for housing will be a busier period, and we'll see that impact on the contact centre because of the weather, you get more boilers break, roofs start leaking, etc. But the other important point on this, if you look at the stage 1 percentage of complaints that were closed on the bottom left-hand side, 82% for December, 82% for November were closed within the 15-day SLA. So that's a big improvement from where we were at in Q2, which you can see was 64%. So again, more complaints being responded to more quickly. The key thing is the quality. And what you can also see is the stage 2 complaints. And the key thing here is that we want to see a reduction in the number of stage 2 complaints, because we shouldn't have escalations if we respond properly in the first instance. But where we do, it's important that they're managed within time. What you can also see is the highest volume directorate and the biggest month-on-month variation with city operations for December and for the quarter. But again, there is a story to tell for that, which Darren will include in the second part of the presentation. The next slide talks about members' inquiries specifically. So again, what you can see here, and the really important bit of this, is that members are engaging now with the process, and we are seeing considerable increases in the volume.
There is some pushback, you need to be aware of.
Yeah. The SLA for responses for members' inquiries is probably the biggest improvement. So for December, again, 72% of inquiries were closed within 10 days, and 68% for stage 1, as opposed to 48% for quarter 1. So again, slowly but surely there is improvement in those areas. And you'll see when we get to the members' reporting how that will be really valuable for members moving forward, so that you've got visibility over what is happening. This slide really just gives you a visual representation of what's happened post go live of the new process. So the red line on the right-hand side demonstrates where the new process kicked in. And what you can see is not necessarily representative of an increase, but certainly the volume of activity that is now going through the complaints teams in terms of an inquiry or a complaint, in comparison to what was processed through the complaints teams before that date. So all of that intelligence that we can collect now that we have that visibility is really, really key in terms of driving those improvements. We know that we have a number of complaints that are non-justified, and across the board that normally represents around 15% of complaints that come in where people have a fixed penalty notice that they don't like. But that doesn't mean that it's a justified complaint. The focus for us is on the 75% of justified complaints where we have issues around service quality, and we drill right down into the detail to find out what those root causes are. Members' reporting has been developed following a number of workshops, so you'll be pleased to know that by the end of the month we'll be in a position to distribute the reports. We've got some technical work that we need to do to enable self-serve functionality, but the members' report now can be produced and distributed. And this is just a sample of what that gives you. So there are different formats that you can see complaints and inquiries by directorate. So you can actually filter on any given month, on any given service, and then into individual divisional levels. And that gives you, at any moment in time, when we get into real time where you can self-serve and access this, you'll be able to click through those fields, and that will give you the real-time data. What we're having to do initially is produce the reports and send them out. So we'll give you sort of a monthly summary and a view until we can get the self-serve access.
Yeah.
It is, yes, across all directorates.
Well, it will be, citywide, but ward related. So, but ultimately, we want to get to the point where we're completely transparent. It's published on the web. People can then look at it as a resident, as a business, or anything else.
Just to prepare Darren, that means Darren can identify individual crews.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the key questions that you will need to answer. What are you doing? Yeah, anyway.
I know we've talked a lot about data, but the value here is we're now exposing it, now do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's the important part on this. It's, the data is only one part of the story, but it doesn't lie. The data is the data. So you're getting the facts to be able to support what you need in terms of a business case to make the change, or to address poor performance, or to address conduct, or whatever the complaint analysis gives you. You've then got, a suite of data that can give you the evidence that you need when you're tackling this. But what this gives members at a glance is how many cases are open, how many have been closed, how many are at stage 1 and stage 2. Is it a complaint? Is it a member inquiry, or is it a member complaint? We actually get very few member complaints. It's predominantly inquiries or complaints from customers. We do have member complaints complaints, but they are very few and far between in the context of the volumes.
Is that the 4?
What this also gives you is a heat map. So you can see it by, as a visual, a portfolio dashboard for your ward and all the services that are involved. And again, you can visualise that by month, by service, and you can sort of select the fields that you want to see. And again, for root cause analysis, and this again is really key for members. And when we've done a piece of work recently in Ladywood, where we've been out looking at a variety of issues and root causes, there's no one single service that's at fault. There's about 4 services that are involved in an improvement piece there, where we can start to shape the services. So again, this gives you, you can see visually the highest complaint volumes, activity categories, service quality, which will not be a surprise to anybody. And then it's normally shortly followed by a failure to do something. So at the moment, across the board, 75% of our complaints relate in those 2 categories, but there are some that fall into the other areas. What you can see at the bottom of this slide is the cases by the problem type. So is it the efficiency of the service? Is it a failure to do something? And depending on the service that you pull the report for, those numbers will vary quite considerably. But again, it just gives you that level of detail that at the moment you don't necessarily get through.
Can I just say, Chair, this is exactly what I will be challenging directors on.
Yeah, I was going to come back on that. You need to challenge them, and they need to challenge their.
But we're integrating the reporting at every level. So examples of service improvement. Where is the service improvement? What have you done? Because we know it needs to be owned.
Yeah, but that needs to be public as well, so that it isn't just a dialogue between you. I mean, obviously there'll be confidential issues that you would deal with on individual members of staff, but in terms of broad improvements for the service, everybody needs to know what it is, so they can be confident that there is a plan.
Yeah, but also, and this isn't, be careful about what you wish for, but there will be a point at which I will have to do an additional analysis, which is the levels of demand. Because there may be issues where there simply is not enough resource going into a particular service area because the levels of demand are spiralling. So there is an additional conversation.
Sure.
Now, my first port of call will be, are we doing what we need to do within the resources envelope to the best ability that we've got? So that's the first port of call, and I will be really driving that. But there will be points at which we simply are not resourcing the service enough to deliver on the demand that we're seeing.
And then just some really snippets of where.
So hand raised. Is someone monitoring hands, by the way? Because thanks to the tenants, I think it's just raised up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, yes, because I'm looking at my agenda and okay. Liz, do you want to come in?
Yeah, if it's okay to just interject briefly, it's just in response to what you've just said and what the Chief Executive has said. I think with the housing queries, I've already put a comment in the chat. I think it's difficult because I am still experiencing a long delay before getting replies to queries, and it's difficult because you've got families that have, particularly people who've been in the private renting sector and have faced eviction after the end of the ban on evictions. And it's very difficult to have to keep telling them that you haven't got the information, and they're in desperate circumstances. But it comes back to Deborah's point about the level of demand, and that's clearly one of the services which is under the most pressure all the time. So I think that's where I feel that we do need some extra resource in the service and in the complaints handling. Thanks very much.
Carry on, and then I'm going to bring members in. Sorry, I'm going to bring members in when you finish, Wendy, and then we can. All turn off guns on.
Okay. Okay, so some good news stories then, before the goodness come out. There is some good news across all areas, it's fair to say. So I won't read these out, individually, but just pick snippets out as you could. It's all in the report for you to see. But really, I think the positive action. So where does the data go? So we compile a report now every month for each directorate to say, here are your top 5 complaints, here's the root cause, here's the problem category, and drill down basically to a complaint level detail that shows exactly what is going wrong in a particular area, whether it be waste services, whether it be social care, whether it be housing. And as a result of that, there's some really good work that's happening where we're starting to shape services, shape policy, review resourcing, and actually support service areas with clearing backlogs or workloads that have not been able to be reached. So for adult social care, there was an urgent MP tomorrow that came in and it was categorised as a failure to do some protection. The constituents family have raised concerns about the service user not receiving any care, and that he was partially blind, suffered from mental health issues, and was suffering with an alcohol problem. The complaints team linked straight in that day with the relevant social work team to discuss the case, and actually an urgent referral was sent through to community network support. Now, normally that would have gone into the service and been weighted, but actually as an escalation come through the complaints team, you have one person holding the activity that then joins up with a number of different services to make sure that the outcome that the service users family were happy with, because there was prompt action being taken, whereas before that would have bounced into several different teams, probably with 4 or 5 different officers having the response to feed into that process, but by having that single view of the issue, they really helped to draw in those other services. And that was a similar example in housing around antisocial behaviour complaint that came in. And again, by the complaints team handling that, this has been an issue for 6 months with this family in a particular area of the city. But actually, by drawing in the relevant partners, this went wider than the council and the police were brought in, and there was a joint action plan created in partnership with the police to try and address and tackle the issues. So much more of a proactive focus on trying to resolve some of these long-standing issues as opposed to simply responding to the antisocial behaviour request or the fly tipping or the pothole or the activity that's happening. Similarly in city operations, there's some really positive stuff. Without stealing Darren's thunder, I'll just read one of the examples out. There was a complaint that the drop lists were not being used effectively, so the dropped work lists, which meant that the action to remove the waste was in place before the complaint response was investigated. And so now the complaint staff within the depots repurpose the drop work to enable a more collaborative response. So it's not just specifically that crew. They work collectively in the depots and they're embedded and they're part of that structure. So the complaints teams, the business support staff and the operational managers review that work that comes in each day, try and get alternative crews that may finish slightly early to go back and pick that work up, rather than that just waiting a trailer the next day for somebody else to come in and pick up. That helps to avoid complaints coming in because they're going back to collect the drop work that day as opposed to within 2 days or 3 days' time, or possibly a week after. So there really is, I would say, a lot more ownership, a lot more visibility, definitely transparency. We've still got issues in terms of volume management. We can't keep throwing resources at this. We know the 29 full-time equivalent posts that we've put in to prop up the existing complaints process has cost £1.2 million. We know that we've been given that temporarily. We've got a 12-month period now to really drive the service improvement, get the volume of complaints down to a manageable level so that we can take that £1.2 million investment back out. But as I alluded to earlier, we can't do it independently. So we need to sign with everybody to really drive that improvement. But we have got a commitment now from directorates. We've got a process. And the complaints teams go back, check the service improvement plans and say, well, where are we? Has that been completed before we produce the next month's report? So that's really, really positive.
Okay. So you're planning to do monthly reports?
Oh, yeah. So we do that already for directorates, and we report into CLT as well. So the corporate position, then we have directorate view specifically, and then where we've got particular issues, so this doesn't apply to the whole council, but we then do specific work. So you will see Darren's report, we literally go down to a road level, a crew level, where we've got particular issues that head into a directorate, we then start to address that through the improvement programmes.
Right. Before I bring members in, Deborah, I know you've got to go off to another meeting. Yeah. So is there anything you want to say just before you go? Is there anything that members want to ask you?
Well, I was going to say, I'm just with Deborah actually.
Yeah,
that's okay. Before I come in on the other points, I know you mentioned growth. I'll look at the city, and I think most residents in the city do look at the city geographically and think, yeah, it's the nucleus of where we are, and it should have investment. And you've mentioned Goldman Sachs, and you've mentioned big names, and we've got HS2. If people come in, they're seeing buildings flying up left, right, and centre. And after the pandemic, I think it's a really positive move that there's momentum that we've got that coming in. I think when I really drill down to my area, and I've mentioned to you before at the group about property assets and stock that the council have. And it is a wonderful thing, but people do ask, and rightly so, great, we've got investment coming in, that's the economic growth. What does that mean? What GDPR and sorry, not GDPR, the growth and all that goes with it, yeah. What does that mean for everybody else in the suburbs? And I think I keep mentioning property assets because you do have stock elsewhere. We're seeing that growth, but we've got that stock that the council owns itself all around the city. Are we investing in that as well as investing in the nucleus? And I think that's the issue that people come to me about, because what we see is the issue of people raising complaints. And oh, by the way, what is happening with those local shops? Because we're getting ever such a lot of antisocial behaviour. And by the way, council, did you see 5 more fly tipping incidents? So root cause analysis, great with that, but it is those improvements that aren't quite your individual specific complaints, but it will be a preventative measure rather than a reactive measure in the long term. I suppose is what I'm getting to with that. So I just wanted to reiterate that because I know you're big on that.
Yeah.
And I know you've listened to me on that, and I just don't want, when you do those CLT meetings or whatever, the corporate plans, that is looked at. Because we've talked about reactive today, we never really focused on forecasting. And you probably do in private meetings, I don't doubt that, Deborah, but it's something we don't really discuss rather than that reactive. And I know you've got to sort the reactive first before the forecasting, but the forecasting as the finances, where's it going in a 5-year plan down the line? For Longbridge and West East, for everybody else's wards, what are we doing elsewhere? Because yes, we focus on the nucleus, but it's elsewhere as well. I just think that needs to be said really.
Do you want me to respond to that?
If you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
Then if you've got shoots off.
No, it's fine, and I'll be here for as long as I need to be. So there are a couple of things. So it's not enough for me to have these conversations with CLT in rooms like this. So CLT will meet in places outside the city centre. So the next meeting we will have in Druids Heath, and I want CLT to walk the patch, I want them to experience the patch. So that's the first thing. The second thing is our levelling up plan, I think is really ambitious, and I would argue it's the best levelling up plan across the country in local government at the moment, because we've been really thoughtful about what that looks like, and we've used not just forecasting with our complaints, I think, but we've used proper economic forecasting as well. So what do we think the economy is going to look and feel like over the next 5 to 10 years? And in addition to that, how do we better use the resources that we've got and assets that we've got as a city council? We are the 20th largest landowner in the country. You wouldn't know that. We shouldn't be operating a deficit. We should be operating in a much smarter way, having access to those kind of assets. And that's really important that we start to think differently about that. Our future city plan is not just about the city core, it's about the city. And I know what's just as important to residents is that local parade of shops, the garages that are behind those shops that are left vacant and are home to antisocial behaviour, access that people have got to good quality food, the way in which those local places are connected into not just the city centre, but in, out and around the city as well. So I want you to be reassured that when I talk about the city and the future of the city, it's not about the city centre. Because if all residents can't touch, taste and feel the benefits of that inward investment we're seeing, then it counts for nothing. And I'm absolutely clear about that with CLT. And you know, I'm going out to Longbridge this afternoon to kind of just understand and experience what the environment looks and feels like in that part of the city. So I don't know whether that gives you any comfort, and I know that you will only trust CLT and the organisation when you start to experience and see the improvements. But I do want you to be. I do want you to have trust in what we're trying to do, I guess. But equally, if you think there are other things that we should be doing that we're not doing, then I know that you will contact me and talk to me.
Drafted a letter yesterday.
Yeah, that's what because if I don't know, I can't fix it. You know, so that is a problem. But you do need to be reassured that for CLT, it isn't just about the city centre core. And I know that, you know, and growing up in areas outside the city centre in this city, I know what the challenges are. But I think the sadness is that, you know, the big challenges that we're seeing are more complicated than a response from just the city council. So the other piece of work we're doing, we've got a joint top team development with the police, for example, because we can't deal with antisocial behaviour in parades of shops and in vacant, vacant garages on our own. We've got to do that hand in hand with our partners and with the police. So that's the other thing that we're introducing, that different kind of culture about acknowledging that the city council cannot deal with meet these challenges and deal with these problems on its own. So better collaborative working with our partners.
We could do with local strategic partnerships, you know, which is we used to have back in the
constituency
days, which were fantastic. Because that was replicating what you do at a city centre level, at a local level.
Yeah.
And I always say partnership starts with relationships. Unless you have those relationships on a regular basis, partnership doesn't work.
Exactly.
Roger, do you want to come in? Roger Harmer?
Yep, thank you, Chair, and thank you for enabling this meeting to happen in a hybrid format. I wanted to pick up, first of all, on the housing point, because rather like Councillor Clement, I'm finding it still very variable. That I do get some responses reasonably promptly, but I also get some that are taking a significant amount of time and require chasing. And it illustrates one point, which, I mean, I was told in, I think, around November that extra resources were being put in specifically to tackle the backlog in applications, which, of course, isn't going to change how quickly people get housed, but at least lets people know what their situation is quicker. For example, are they entitled to medical priority or not, for example, rather than, you know, with feeling that they're in limbo waiting for a decision for 6 months, as it has been. And I was told that a large number of extra resources were being put in with the aim of clearing it by Christmas. Well, it appears that hasn't been done, but we've not been given any feedback from that. So, you know, and there's nothing, I can't see anything in this report that gives where we are with that. And it's clearly a major source of casework issues.
We're doing housing next time, Roger. Housing are coming next time.
But we can give an answer.
Yeah, no, but I'm picking up on what people have said. Okay. I'm also concerned that that there are elements of complacency, and that's about the volume. So these, the statement, well, we've got bigger volume. Is it just because we're picking more up? Well, may well be, but if you take the example of missed collections, and I will specifically thank you, Chair, for helping me to do this little bit of work by getting a response from the department. We've had statements that the service has improved a lot, that collections are better than 99%, based on the reported missed collections. Well, what I did was I got a week when there were lots of collections dropped in my ward, got the department to tell me which roads were dropped, but also how many people reported missed collections from each road. And that gives you a fairly simple way, when you know how many houses there are in each road, to correlate the two and give you a rate at which people report missed collections. Now, basically, I mean, I've shared this information in more detail with Housing and Neighbourhood Scrutiny yesterday. But in summary, in the first full week in January, I looked at houses that had the 2,100 homes that the council admits weren't collected on. Of those, 56 reported it. That's a reporting rate of between 1 in 35, 1 in 40 of the missed collections. If you apply that reporting rate to the number of reported missed collections in the last periods reported to Housing and Neighbourhood, which was the middle of last year, the 6 months in the middle of last year, the report says, oh, we've got 6,836 reported missed collections, but that's only out of 2.81 million. So that's quite a low level. But if you apply that rate proportionately, if the rate in my ward is typical, you're actually looking not at 99% collection rate, but around 91% collection rate. So radically below. And what I've asked is, because you might say, well, Acots Green is very untypical. Nobody reports missed collections there, and they do everywhere else. Well, I think that's unlikely, not certainly to the degree that it would take to get the actual rate up at 99%, because it would imply other people are reporting it 10 times as much, which I frankly don't believe. But what I've asked is that, similar quick little studies are done in some other wards to check whether this reporting rate that I found in my ward is similar across the rest of the city. But what it's showing is that, the service levels are much, much lower than is being reported in this area. And the statements made by leadership that it's all well over 99% and on the way that we have to report it, etc., don't relate to what residents are actually experiencing. So I think we need to be honest, and where there are fairly quick and easy ways of finding out what the level of service actually is, use them rather than hiding behind, well, this is what the LGA or the government tells us to report. Well, fine, report what they tell us to have to report, but also actually go and look for what the truth actually is in a way like this, which is, as I say, didn't take me very long once the figures were actually given to me. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to answer that.
Do you want me to respond to the first part about the housing backlog?
Yeah.
Just to give you an updated position on that. So when we looked at that at its peak, we had 16,500 applications at the point that we intervened around about October last year. By December, we deployed obviously a number of contact centre staff to help clear that backlog. And we reduced that down to 4,000 by the time we got to the end of December. So we wanted a commitment that we would clear it, but with new applications coming in, we cleared over 12,000 applications, 12,500 actually. We got that down to 4,000. So we've been working with the service area directly, and we'll provide a more fuller update. I think Julie and the housing team coming in March, and we'll put all the data together for you. We've now transitioned that back to the service area. And at the moment, as it stood up until I think last week, we were looking at that creeping up slightly to about 6,500. So we're working with one of the service leads in that area now to look at how that can be managed long term to maintain what we hope to get to is a zero balance position of those applications. So we've cleared a considerable volume. It hasn't reduced to zero, and we need to look at how that's going to be managed, either collectively in collaboration with customer services and the contact centre team and the operation unit. So didn't quite hit the target that we wanted to, but we did clear 12,500 applications in that period. But new apps coming in, obviously the volume balanced it.
Okay, Roger, I'm going to move to Darren Share's presentation now. Give him the heads up that I would ask him to answer your second question when he's finished, okay, or during the course of his presentation. Yeah. And you've got questions on behalf of Deirdre when
Before Darren's.
Oh, you want something on?
It was just really naturally. It was for Wendy really. And it's just to say that obviously Deirdre's looked at the papers because she can't make today. But she said she's getting an awful lot of complaints. That the complaints that are coming to her, obviously, as we do, because there's many more residents now complaining themselves to the council direct. Those complaints just, it sounds a little bit vague, but they're not being done, such as street cleaning and vehicle activation signs, miscollections, etc. But I think her issue is around they're reporting it themselves, but it's still no actual feedback correct to them, because they'll go 3 weeks, 4 weeks time and go, well, okay, I've reported it, I've put a notification back, but it actually hasn't actioned. So I think the point is many more are doing it themselves. With these collections as well, never gone on to waste next. Yeah. But it's the actual outcome of it. It just so the report again.
Yeah, we need to feedback, close the loop, and take that
before it even gets to the councillors. I'll leave the next one for Darren.
Okay. Darren, thank you for your patience.
Let me try and get this technology.
We're not going to shoot you, Darren. We know you're on our side and the resident side. That's it. We do, don't we?
This way. Yes, very right. Okay, so in one way, I mean, this has been a long time coming, and well recognised from us from the service area that this new system is driving detail that we need to make a difference. So the presentation I want to go through is give you an overview of the data that we get, but then show you how that we are fitting that into resolve the issue.
Yeah.
And then also, I've got an example of how we are taking the data and taking it right down to some focus group. So that's the aim. That's the aim of the session. So as you've already heard, basically it's right up there with the number of complaints that we see. One source is collections, revenues, and recycling. But we've also got issues down there about the behaviour of the teams, the issues about bin and bin replacement when they go missing, or the pod goes missing, street cleansing, all sorts of other issues. Interestingly, with the flights that are reviewed, there is a sharp difference between recorded complaints from residents and numbers that are coming from elected members. There's a real difference there. When the majority, and again with the rubbish, which is probably still connected to flighting, the rest are resident led, except for those 2 areas where they're generically member led. But what we've got now is the detail, and the detail we can drill down per month, and we can drill down per area. So we can take that this collection data and follow that right the way down the detail levels. So again, this is just on a wider area, but it looks at the counts. So again, you can see this collection, so refuse collection is by far the largest number of complaints that we get across the board.
There's no excuse for behaviour being so high, is there?
No, no excuse, I'm not making any excuse.
No, just behaviour, I mean, that's just common sense.
Yes,
That's
yes.
not resources or anything, it's just bloody mindedness, isn't it?
The issue with behaviour starts, and this is where the granular of this detail is really helpful, and especially with all the complaints and inquiries coming together into one force. So normally, we've probably, historically before this system, those complaints about the crew was probably made directly to the service managers and the depots rather than this process.
Yeah.
This gives much greater clarity that there is an issue there, and that's one area that we've got to tackle because, you know, we've got performance behaviour of over housing and these key collections at 2,500.
We just think how many victim elders do we employ?
In the management team. What it's been able to do is bring all those inquiries and complaints together and allow us to focus on the top areas. We're looking at these collections, obviously, as the key, the driver, as Councillor Harmer says, that this is particularly isolated, these are the people that do complain, and there is a difference of 8%, as Councillor Harmer has identified, that are underreported. But we're aware of because we know from the crews which roads we drop on a regular basis. I'll come on to the difference between different types of reporting later.
Just on that page 4, is that a month? Or what? It doesn't actually say on the page.
2020.
It's the whole year.
It's the whole year.
The point of go
Calendar
live,
year.
yeah, so from go live really, to the complaint process to.
That's all I need, yeah.
Okay, so you can see that in this graph here, which is the numbers before and the numbers after. Obviously, there's a significant increase because what we've now got now is all the data goes to one place. So that all that data has changed the split of inquiries that we're getting and the different levels of complaints that we're getting now, all focused in one place. And as you can see, the two lines at the top shows that we was able to maintain our SLAs we're applying until the numbers have gone increased when the new complaint system came in. But actually now, through the work, and I have to say the teams in the depots, particularly Leslie Hart and James Langdon, have been absolutely fantastic in pointing service managers and depot managers into the right place. And I think that when we was last here, you interviewed one of the depot people that were employed there to deal with the inquiries, and those staff now are fully embedded into the team.
I think she said they know which buttons to press, is what she said. That stuck in my mind.
Exactly. And then what's the good thing about it now is they see themselves as one team. So it's not an inquiry team, and it's not a complaints team, and it's not a service team. This is one team working together, analysing the data to make a real difference.
I think it's important to state that it might look like things have got worse, but actually I don't think anything before April can be relied upon in terms of performance because of the issues that were highlighted well back in 2020 in terms of one system, multiple systems, not directly one. Yeah. So actually the real performance is really in April onwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the clarity now. So those individual emails now are all being collated. So we've got that total visibility, which is a massive step forward with the system. So just to give you an overview of what we're trying to do. So this work fits into all the other transformation programs. Waste service in particular, and Scrutiny is on an improvement journey, and we are doing everything we can to try and develop that. And this was the 8 items that were identified from this. And if you look at some of those, customer services and IT systems, service policy and inconsistency, our staff and structures, we're looking also at the vehicle routing and ramp productivity. We are using the data now from the complaint system to feed into the ongoing programs that we can check. So are we providing the right information to customers right from the start?
are we able to turn around to say, well, we missed today because we've had issues with COVID or a vehicle breakdown or access, but we'll be back in 24 hours, 48 hours. Are we getting that information correctly through? And the level of detail now we're getting to, we are getting into a position where we'll be able to be much more proactive and say, we missed today because we haven't been able to get in because of the parked cars, but we'll be back tomorrow. And that's a lot of the work that we do in the lab. These are just some of the other projects that we've started to do. So one of the things that we've done is the recruitment of the refuse collection staff to try and tackle some of that issues about behaviour. We had 30% of our staff were covered by agency. We've now got a full workforce of employees. The only agency we use now offers cover for annual leave and sickness, but the full-time recruitment, so every person on that van is full-time. That's the first time it's ever happened. That gives us greater ability to push down the core values of the city council to all of our staff through our training. We are investing in Tysley. We're investing in a brand new build at Perry Park, and we're building a new facility to bring the depots together at the Stroke. Where's that? It's by Redfern. It's just off the Country Road. So that will bring together Montague Street and Redfern together to have a single depot where we be able to.
Is that going to be a HRC as well?
It's not going to be a HRC. It's right opposite really Tysley, Justice Road. So. But it will give us the greater flexibility, because what we've noticed that Montague Street in their refuse collections, as a small group, it only runs about 8. It only takes one driver to be off with COVID or whatever, and that causes a major problem for the depot because they haven't got resources to pull on spare people. So by pulling them together, that will give us that greater security. Carrying on with our recruitment, we've just done a load of recruitment in street cleansing, which is about to do with the same and grounds maintenance. And the other one is the slabbing and cab and route optimisation. Constantly reviewing the routes that we are doing, using the data that we're getting to look at the miscollections, looking at the roads that we struggle to get in because of access, and access is creeping up as the reason why we're not able to get in there, and to see whether we can route them to a later part of that time. And then obviously we've got that procurement process. We've got a number of initiatives that will go on, but don't really come into refuse collections, but they are really connected to the whole of the waste side of it. But the one that is a major change in here that we are currently looking at, which is just going to make the environment, that's going to radically change what we collect and how we collect it over the next few months and years. So we are in the middle of looking at a big service restructure, so that's making sure we've got the right management team in the right places to tackle the issues that we're putting across. We're looking at our trade and seeing whether we can get more out of trade, and also making on the citizen improvement area, using this information that we're getting from the data to make sure that have we got our message right? Are we completely clear that the residents know what we expect from them? And that's it, both in recycling or collections. Their collection plans. We know we've got a high transport population in certain parts of the city. So how can we keep regularly informing residents exactly what is needed from them to help us carry out our collection? So this bit is taking the data down to that next level, which is and learning from. So we've taken a scenario. We can take any scenario, but what we will do is we'll pull out the data right the way down, and I've got a map in a minute which shows what we can do. We can then go in to do some feedback with our residents. We can do feedback with our staff. And we can then start to link that with the data that we get from the service as well. We can then do a real focus group to look at what we can do, so we don't then carry on just doing the same old thing until we get this problem. For example, if we're having a problem where we've got access issues, rather than just go, it's an access issue, the parking's all terrible. Is there anything we can do with highways? Is there anything we can do with residents? Can we get, we need to put enforcement lines down there? Is there a different vehicle that we can use? It's looking at it in wider, rather than just going, yeah, so we always have a problem, that's what we don't get. So it's looking at those sort of things that we can use this data to do. That gives us that slide deck, it can go right down into the detail. And these individual sessions, based on specific points that's coming out of the data, will mean that we can use the data in a better way. And then obviously the actions will come through. I'll show you so the example we're looking at is say the assisted elections. So we can pull the raw data across. So we can pull the raw data across against each year. So we can then see whether it's a problem, an increasing problem, or not an increasing problem. We can then look at against the whole overall numbers, so we can get a ranking of the system. So we can get the raw data. Then this is the difference. We can then start to map that onto the city plan. And this is quite high level because obviously a drug in our city, but that we can drill that right down towards to local areas, so we can then start to see whether those circles are clustered or whether they're slightly wider apart. And we can do that. This is for installations. We can do for issues around access. We can do a number of things now where we can actually start to focus and use data to see whether it is individuals, individual roads, individual staff, individual routes, and start to tweak the change.
Sorry, Darryl, usually interject, but it was something I noticed on this particular one. It was something that Deirdre Alden raised with me to ask today, so I'm going to interject if that's all right.
Yeah.
If you look at that where next to the bubbles, and it says in that box, the data is taken directly from my caseworks and not 100% validated this map. Will remove a large amount of cases raised without the Birmingham postcode.
Yes.
Including all MP inquiries using the House of Commons as the postcode. So Deirdre's rightly asked, because I thought the same when I read that. She's saying, it's my postcode. It suggests that any complaint I make, this is Deirdre, Councillor Alden, comes from my postcode and not my constituent's postcode. Can you confirm that? Because when I looked through it and she sent it to me, I actually thought, what does that mean? Because I have to travel 2 days a week for my job.
Yeah.
And if I have a lunch hour and I work, I use that.
Yeah.
Now I make complaints during my break when I'm catching up and I'm outside the city.
Yes.
And I thought, is mine getting recorded under a different postcode?
It's only the property postcode, so it relates to the property or the individual's details that you're complaining about, where there is one. So what we have is a number of complaints that come in that might be visitors of the city. They don't live in Birmingham, but they're complaining, so they don't have a fixed
Usually
address.
that's litter, isn't it?
Yeah, but they would complain about either access to services or litter or fly tipping or.
When I used to represent the city centre, I used to get a lot of visitors who said,
Yeah.
I love the city, but do something about the begging or do something about the litter and
So it's
stuff.
not picking up where you are.
No,
Right, okay.
majority of complaints recorded.
It's associated with the complaint. So if the complaint gives us an address, then it's that address.
Okay, not where the complaint
Not
comes
where you
from.
are.
The city centre does seem to have a big circle there.
So what about the MP's House of Commons postcode then?
Well, again, it's been what we need to think about how we're recording the postcode, because if the postcode isn't coming in through the MP or the
So you need
location.
to ask them to supply.
We haven't
Sorry,
got
say that again, sorry.
So if the MP, the resident comes to the MP,
Yeah,
the MP doesn't give us the resident's postcode that relates to it, we end up having no postcode to report or the MP's postcode. So in effect,
Can I,
so how does that get recorded?
Case,
they have caseworkers paid for by the bloody state.
They do, more often than not, though.
We don't.
To be fair, they will give you the very specific and particulars of an address or a customer that we've already got tracked in a system, and we can already do that. But it's just, that's really a caveat to say,
All right.
where people are recording complaints that don't provide an address or a postcode, that will be missing from this data set because it won't relate specifically.
But if you have an address, you
Yeah,
can put the postcode.
Absolutely.
Do you work it if they don't put a postcode? Because I don't always put a postcode on mine.
We've got search.
I was going to say,
So if you've got road,
I think it's a caveat that is probably being read into more significance than it is. I think that's fair.
And we can actually pull that data if we want some assurance for the next session to say, well, this is the number of complaints that have come in.
Maybe that
So you can see,
would reassure members.
is it 2%, is it 20%, what's missing from the data set?
I think that's Councillor Hart was talking about, there's the data sets potentially are at risk if people aren't telling us, and then there's a question about miscollections.
Yeah. But I guess I always used to say to you, Wendy, when we introduced the member system, that the members' complaints would more or less mirror the residents' complaints, except for fly tipping. I can understand why residents would come to a councillor for fly tipping, because they might be driving through an area, or they might, so they would, and because it's a communal thing, they would automatically assume we would be better suited to sorting it out than if it was an individual miscollection. So I get that.
Yeah. You can see on the left-hand side though, the ability with this slide that I could turn things on and off to get specific issues. So if we've got a particular issue, like I can see straight away, is a cluster in that Perry Bar area and a cluster down the south. So I can turn Montague Street off, Redfern's off, and then just focus on the areas that will then just come on those. So then that will take us right down to the road.
Yeah. Or it's what action you take.
Yeah. So,
You're going to come on to that.
That's the key, and this is the bit that we've now got the detail to be able to take that down. And that's what the next step is, then taking this data, linking it with our back office data about individual routes and our routes, to then start to tweak and change the routes to attack the different areas.
I always remember when one of the depot managers gave me a reply that said, additional cardboard by the side of the bin gets thrown in the general waste. And I contacted you and you said, he's wrong. And I couldn't understand how a depot manager could not know what our policy is.
But there is an issue with the size of the cardboard.
I know
there is.
But
It does go in the general.
But no, this wasn't, a caveat. This was
Which
all.
is crazy though.
Yeah.
So your washing machine cardboard will go in general waste.
Unless it's cut up.
Yeah, I cut
Yes.
mine. I cut mine up. I'm a
And
dutiful.
the reason,
I used to, I'm sure lots of people who live in Moseley and Hartlepool.
the reason for that is the back of the truck. So if you picture the back of a recycling truck, it's split into three. And the left-hand side is the smaller one, and it is the cardboard one. And the hydraulic, if the large boxes get in there, the hydraulics machine just blocks up and you lose the whole.
It does need looking at because lots of people have things delivered by Amazon in enormous boxes these days.
Yeah.
And delivered by
This is-
disaster.
Yeah. And this is the bit where the environmental bill becomes really interesting, because the reason we've got the three split is because the larger side takes plastics, glass, and tin, and paper on the left-hand side. Now, the environment is talking about taking glass out for a composite scheme, which means that the element on the right-hand side, the tonnage, to about 16,000 tonnes, will go down. And therefore, instead of having three ways, if we have the divide straight down the middle, so it's 50-50, the ability to take more paper and more cardboard comes through and solves that.
Because it's a win-win taking more card, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's money.
Yeah, so it doesn't excuse the fact that the depot manager didn't know what the policy was. That's just the point I'm making. Liz Clements?
Yeah, thanks, Carly, and thanks, Darren. Very interesting presentation, and you know, good to see, you know, the general, you know, trend and the innovations that you've got for dealing with some of the problems. The questions that I had relate to your slide 4, which is the bar chart with the, you know, the number of individual complaints, because anecdotally, I'd say, you know, that the number of complaints I'm receiving about miscollections has gone down, but I'm still got, you know, a really, you know, continuing problem with roads that are just continually getting missed. And in some cases, there are the reasons that you've explained, like too many parked cars, or it's, you know, it's a narrow square. I've got a council estate where Macefield, where it's impossible to get the vehicles up there. But there are other instances where it does appear that the road is just simply left off. And I've asked repeatedly, you know, how the staff are briefed about, you know, the route and how this, you know, how this can keep on happening. And I think that's just really, you know, unfortunate, because it gives the residents the impression that, you know, that the crew is just simply not bothering to visit their road. And that comes back to some of the behaviour and attitudes that you're talking about. And then I wanted to ask, what process analysis have you done, you know, on designing routes on new housing estates? Because I've got a massive area of new housing on the old Selly Oak Hospital site, and there's all sorts of problems there with, you know, it's very confusing. I know that from trying to door knock there. But you know, how do you work up routes on new estates? How have the crews briefed about that? Is the new slab in the cab technology going to help with that? And how quickly is that going to happen? And then the final question, are there problems at the moment with the sourcing and distribution of new bins? Because the other problem I've got all the time is people are ordering new bins, particularly on this area of new housing, and it's just taking months for anything to happen. And again, that's generating loads of repeated complaints from myself and from the residents. Thanks very much.
I think we've all got new estates where it takes an age for the crew to get it right.
Yes. So this is where our journey has changed. So at the moment, if I explain how it works at the moment, so the way the routes are developed by a computer system. So the computer takes all the roads, all the new buildings, all the new properties, and puts it into an area based on the old time and motion study. So it will identify that an average crew could do around, depends whether it's depends on the house, but effectively between 900 and 1400 properties. If it's a day or a day. So there's 1400 properties, and that's based on the tonnage on the vehicle, but also the distance between bins. So Terrace Road has more 1400s. Some of the larger roads and larger properties got less numbers because we're walking this way. So that's how it generally works, and that goes at the moment on a piece of paper to the crew, so they're working off paper maps, and that's where we've got confusions and problems. The slab is what we've been talking about for a number of years. That is in current rollout. So one depot has already started utilising that. That gives the crew the ability through a Google map process to see the route, see the individual properties, individual bins, and talk directly to the contact centre and customer service. So that is on rollout now. So we've got it in one depot. It's going into.
Any kickback?
No, there's been. We've had to take staff through that process and explain what it is. It's about helping them when they see the actual program, because it also puts up issues about live traffic as well, which is always an issue. So it doesn't tell the driver they must go down this road, that road, and that road in that particular order. But you can see the route, but it will also have live traffic up there. So if there was an accident or something else,
It'll have assisted collections on?
Assisted collections in there. So when they go into the road, assisted collections will pop up. So we a lot of the issues that we are having look into, that we know that repeat stuff, we are hopeful the slab is going to solve a lot of those issues.
Okay.
The interaction to, and it will also record tagging as well, because we get a lot of miscollections where some residents might get tagged. So the bin is either contaminated, which we can't put in the back of the wagon, or it's too heavy because of the hydraulics and so on. The bin gets tagged. If a resident phones in, even with that tag at the moment, it gets reported as a miscollection, but it's not miss. We made that decision, we can't pick it up. And the slab stops that action, stops the ability for the resident to report it as a miss, because it's of no reason why to get in there.
You'll be able to then track which streets they're on there, so that will hit the council honestly.
Absolutely. So that starts, once we get onto the electronic version, the ability to look at the roads that we complete and the roads that we aren't able to complete. So let's, for example, if a vehicle breaks down, we've got over 200 of these vehicles out every day, something goes wrong. The manager, through their control centre, the crew phones in, I can't get down that road because it's blocked, my vehicle's blocked. The manager can then lift those roads that haven't been completed or ticked off by that individual crew and allocate those to all the crews that are still out. That is the ability of doing that. So looking at the complexities of the new builds, the overall round will be put onto that system. But if that crew is struggling and they can't get through, and some of the newer estates are easier than some of the more difficult, say Hawksley, Franklin, going down from one cul-de-sac into another cul-de-sac, the ability to be able to lift those and drop those onto another round, if we've got a particular problem, it is going to be a massive improvement for us, rather than at the moment, that crew comes back, that's the colour of the map, and then we have to find another crew to then go back out later.
You know, planning, and I agree, it's also the numbering of some of the roads. Alvin and I went to a presentation about Newport Loop, and on this new estate, Newport Loop, which is in Ladywood, but it's right on the border with my ward. Highways had a team that allocate numbers to roads. I didn't know. I thought it was planning that did it. And sometimes there's no logic to have these numbers. So, you know, number 13 could be on one side and, you know, there's no logic. And I just wonder whether there is any, you know, the coordination between you and planning about how wide roads should be so the wagons can get down and all that sort of thing. I know we're going up with a bit of a tangent, but, you know, surely as the planning authority, we automatically contact highways with the planning application to see if they've got any issues. They ought to contact you guys as well.
They do, but it depends on the development and the numbers of developments in there. But you're absolutely right. Some of the problems, we're starting to see an increase in access issues.
Yeah.
It's almost taking over more than the vehicle issues now. And some of that is because one parked car in one way, and we've got a 26-ton truck trying to get down, and then once it's down, trying to get back out is a major problem for us. So we do share with our planning colleagues the size, the turning circle of our vehicles. And when they are planning large developments, that is taken into consideration. But I have seen some planning proposals myself that have come through, which would be impossible, or put the onus on so much on the resident to bring their bins almost 50 yards to the presentation point, because that's the only place we can get the truck in. So it is a challenge, and it's not just us. If we can't get in, how can a fire engine get in? So
Sure.
So
Do you want to deal with Councillor Clemency's comment about repeatedly asked roads still getting missed?
Yeah, I've got
Sourcing and distributing.
I've got one. I've got a little estate, 3 years, and they're still missing it.
Okay, so this is so the system at the moment is that it's basically a paper map that goes to the individual crews. The new estates that come in are allocated to existing teams. So we try to, we don't automatically get additional resources when we get new development. So we try to pin it out. So it does take, it has taken time in the past. Port is a classic example where development starts coming on in bits. Sometimes we don't even know about the start of the residence. And then by the time we've got that, it hasn't been, been put into our paper copies, which means that the crews miss it, and then they miss it on a regular basis. The slab will take all of that out because the route optimization from the GIS position will show those exact locations.
So when will it be rolled out across the city then?
So we're in rollout now. So Redfern are using it at the moment, and then we go to Montague Street, then Lifford, and then Perryborough.
And what time scale?
Over the next 3 months.
Okay, pretty good.
I think the important difference with this rollout, it's fair to say, is that crew involvement created around, because the system won't know times of day that potentially roads busy with schools and different things. So that's all being built up, that sort of intel is being built up, and the routes being built in that way to try and avoid future issues.
Liz wanted to come back. Liz.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. Thanks, Darren. You've now partially answered the question, because I suppose I feel I've been to meetings, for a number of years where the so-called slab in the cab, which I assume it means tablet computer, is being referred to. So it's good to get the clarification from Darren about the timescale for this actually being operational, because relying on paper maps just seems archaic, and all the estates, the two estates that have been built on the Selly Oak Hospital site, so we've had real problems with road naming there. So I've had to go to the section of the Inclusive Growth Directorate that deals with property naming. It's the bit that also does property searches. And we've actually gone through a process of getting some of the roads renamed because it's because of the difficulties with access. The way that they've been named is not logical, and all that sort of thing. That's changing in real time. So if the crews are being given paper maps, that just isn't going to be adequate, because in that situation there's new roads being opened all the time, and we need the online technology which makes it possible to update quickly. Then I also asked the question about getting hold of new wheelie bins, because that's one of my biggest headaches at the moment, and the delays that are currently occurring with that.
New bins.
Can I just come back on the slab as well? It is a tablet, and the beauty of it is pictorial, so it doesn't really, it shows the road and individual properties where the bins are. So it doesn't matter if the name has changed, where the crews can actually see the physicality of it. And at the moment, they've got a list for assisted collections and a list for those roads. So that's how mistakes are making. That will be changed with the slab. New builds and not new builds. New bins is the question. We do have a contract. We have had an issue. Getting pods more than bins because the pod manufacturer that fits into our bins has slightly changed. So you can buy a slightly bigger pod or a slightly different one with a different shape, which is a classic example. So we've had a number of issues with that. We've now been able to source one that fits or pull it into our existing bin. We're still bringing on the site. So we have had an issue with that, and then we have changed contracts with our bin supplier. So again, earlier in the year we were on a backlog. That should be resolved now. And we've also, for example, at the moment in renewals for garden, getting new garden, we've pre-ordered all those garden bins. They're sitting on Montague Street, so they will start.
Did you pay by backs for those garden bins? Yeah, you did, didn't you?
I'm sure we did.
Yeah. Well, why can't residents pay by backs for their? We're fixing it.
That is something. That is.
You've been up 18 months I've been raising this. You've been fixing it for 18 months.
We're nearly there. I think we'll be there for next.
Because it's unique technology to us, isn't it? And it must be really a difficult task to get this right. I can see how you would struggle.
Yes, we know this.
Yeah. All right. But just going back to the crew's involvement.
I had the pleasure of going around the new Royal Mail sorting office at Aston. What struck me, I went really early in the morning. What struck me was that the post people, men and women, are given all the posts for their round, and they sorted out in which order they wish to deliver it. And I said, shit, that's bonkers, that is. He said, no, he said, they're the ones that know the area best, and they know which order. So they are allocated time of the morning to come in to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember when we spoke the last time you came 2 years ago, you said it was all computerised.
Yes.
But you seem to have tinkered it now, so there is crew involvement.
Yes, exactly. This is one of the problems that we had with the old slab, was that the old slab was imposed. So it was, here's the computer system, here's the slab, there you go, get on and do it. And there was no buy-in, there was no trust in that system. We've now changed that. So although we have the generic areas, so the computer says 1,400 properties. There's the land, puts full of block around it. The crew then test it, and they've been testing it and changing it. And the map, although they will get that whole round, we do not tell them the round. You must go down this road now and this road there. It is up to the driver and that crew. They know the patch. They know which ways to go. And that's what they do. And so the flexibility within that.
You know, if I was a crew member, I would, and something, this is the way you've got to do it. Yeah, it's like telling a ward councillor about their patch when you know it better than a lot of people within the wider city council. And it just makes sense.
Yeah, yes, yeah, we've moved on.
Okay. Christian wants to ask a question.
This might already have been done.
Sorry.
But the question, I don't know whether this has been heard of it. Have members of the committee been out with the crews? Has it
I
been?
asked this and actually.
Years ago, we went to depots.
I've done it, so I've been over the scrutiny committee before, and it's actually highlighted some of the issues, but actually it's answered some of the questions as well. So actually some of the complexities that have gone through, and when I went over the former authority, they got up at whatever it was, 6 o'clock in the morning, jumped in with one of their crews.
I don't know, the problem is when they come back from their rounds, they want to get off pretty quick, and that's what I found. They were.
No, actually in the vans.
Yeah, no, we haven't been in the van.
To go in the van, we'd have to do, there's at least a day's training, PPE kit. There's no reason, I mean, you heard Jimmy Ted saying that people are coming out, so there's no reason why we couldn't organise a tour around, sit in the vehicle, look at the slab technology, how that works. That is,
Just an opportunity to talk to some of the crews.
Yeah, absolutely.
Follow them around and part of their journey.
I've got no.
Yeah, which is why yesterday when I went to the HRC, I spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours with the crew, and chatting to them about the frustrations and what the downside of the job is, etc., etc. And
That's actually was going to be one of my questions, because I remember John Burke back a few years ago, and we had a group of times to go. And I know I scribbled it down because you said somewhere in your speech earlier about feedback to staff and residents.
Yeah.
My question was, what about feedback engagement with councils? Because we're not really getting that.
Right.
No disrespect to your staff at the depots. I mean, they're very good on the emails, and David was very good.
Yeah.
I can't complain.
Yeah.
But there is no actual community quarter to have a look and just go through what's been missed. And that used to happen when I was elected back in 2015. It's really managing to do it a lot. And that doesn't appear to come forward to us anymore. I mean, we can say no to it, we can say yes, but Christian's right, it's not necessarily in the truck, but certainly engaging at that level with the elected members needs to help pick back up.
Yeah, no, I've got no problem with that. The Clifford and Dan has now got some of the you.
I remember it, and it's fine. John Burke had a dusty old kettle, and it's fine.
But now we have invested in Clifford, so Clifford has got a meeting room. as we do training, which could certainly take a community of this size. The new depot at Perry Bar, that's going to be built and finished in early part of next year. That's got, again, another specific training room, which could certainly host committees and management meetings. And
How do you do the training? Just because, you know, staff, it's not like a lot of jobs that are office based where, you know, you can stop for an hour. You know, so how do you build in the core, you know, what the chief executive and you've all mentioned actually, which is the culture change. How are you doing that with the pressures of time to do the?
Well, this is the bit. So people see the crews and they see the crews on the street, and then they don't see them, and then everybody thinks they couldn't do the job and go home. And that's not what we do. We're using the time when they get back to
They still did that at Lisbon, you told me last time.
No, we get them, and before they go, they obtain a mandatory training. So historically, that's where they what they used to do. That's the mentality of getting around them as quick as they can. And what we've done now is we've harnessed that. Get them back. Let's get them back. And in that time, we're taking through the mandatory training, and that's in groups. So we can then take them through. A lot of it's now IT based. That's why we built these new rooms with screens and all sorts of things in there. So we could take them through, because it was historically it would have been a handout of a leaflet or just a toolbox talk. Well, that's not the investment that we need to make this stuff. And that's why we changed that.
My last question was about excess waste. I'm getting more residents telling me that they're making the reporting complaint themselves, and they get that obviously on the system for the council. And what it says on there, because you won't be able to read it, is your collection was not completed due to the additional waste being left out. And a lot of them are saying, Debbie, I have not left additional ones. So is that being tagged?
Yes, so that would be tagged. So the policy is, unless it's service failure, there's enough room in the bin to take people's waste. So anything that's outside is not being taken. Depends on the crew, because we do know there are a number of crews.
Something sticking out.
Well, it's the bags at the site. So if it's the policy which is on the website and everybody is that's not taken. Some crews go, oh, there's a bag. I'm going to put it on the back of the way. Some crews go, that's not a policy, and that's tagged. And if it's tagged, it's because of the excess. Because in some cases,
it might be heavy though. Some of them.
It might be one bag. In some cases, there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bags. And if you think the round is set up for the volume in the bin and the tipping time, by taking 5 bags extra, that might mean I might not complete the round.
I don't always put my bin out every week though.
And that's some of the issues that Council Harmer issue. So we can, when you look at that's you're not typical non-presentation.
It's a big bin. There's only 2 of us now.
Exactly, and that's replicated across the city. And on the slab, I keep calling it slab. I should call it. I've got into a habit of calling it slab. I must start talking to them, especially when you've got IT people in the room, it's slabs. But that we can record non-presentation on that tablet.
Okay,
Well, that's not.
Well, they don't at the moment. They don't at the
The
moment.
slab's not there at the moment. The slab's not there at the moment, and that's coming up to that. The resident will be able to reply to that with that. So once that's on the council system, when they look at, and it says additional waste has been left out, and the guy goes, no, it hasn't. Okay, it's too late, it's been tagged. Is there a system for the resident to go back to the city council if they're raising a new complaint?
It would be a new process, yeah.
But our process will be. We're going to take the photos.
I've just reminded myself during lockdown, I think we all did it, we all had clear outs. My bin was full for weeks because I was clearing the loft and stuff. It was amazing, wasn't it?
We have seen an increase in household waste over the last 2 years in our collections.
Yeah, you would.
We've also seen an increase in people sorting their recycling out. So so our curbside recycling, and that's got better, but it's masked by the increase in residual waste, which is a real frustration. And I'm hoping everybody's lots have been cleared now, and we will then get back to some normality of collection, which will increase our recycling rate if people continue to do what they're doing in the recycling.
I think the different thing with the technology, it's not just about the crews knowing where assisted collection is or where there's additional properties, it's the data that's going to come back. So that monitoring every day of the crews that are coming back, the technology, looking at what's complete, what's not complete, in the same way that we've seen for complaints, you can really start to drill down on problems. A lot of the crews quite often will say, well, we've attempted a collection, the bin wasn't presented as an example, and the customer will say, well, I did present the bin. And it's who do you believe? Do you believe the crew? Do you believe the customer? You don't want to say to the customer, no, you didn't, start getting into that confrontation.
Yeah.
But as Darren alluded to, with this technology, it's got a provision to be able to take a picture of the road and show that
Because the guy sent me a picture and it didn't have it.
yeah, and it's there. So you feel more confident then saying,
Yeah, well,
"Look, we checked and it wasn't there at the time that the crew arrived. So
When whoever drops off your delivery now, I was in my dressing gown first thing in the morning, and she wanted to take a picture of me holding this bloody parcel. And I said, well, I'm not dressed. She said, well, I won't tell you what she said. Yeah, so people, and I know our parking attendants take photographs of cars, because they say you damaged this is when we used to tell them away, you damaged my car, and the photograph shows the damage was there before it was towed away. Yeah.
So it's on the subject of dressing events. Super early starts.
Yes.
I know we did those for COVID reasons, but there are still some very early starts and a number of residents. I know I've noticed this coming up as a complaint. And I just wondered what was happening with that.
Yes. So at the moment, we are still working to do some COVID measures because I think there's, I know Councillor Harmer raised these numbers. The first week in January, we had just over 90 people on with coronavirus in the Omicron itself, and that has gone through the whole system. So we are holding a number of those conditions, and the early start is basically us trying to stagger the people getting in. So we normally about 2 starts. We've now got almost four starts, starting 5 going on.
So you need to do a newsletter regularly to elected members on these sorts of issues, because just talking to you now, you can say, well, that's logical. Yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, I can see why you're doing that, but we just think it's bloody minding us, What else are we going to think?
Yeah, no, of course. But we are getting to the point now where obviously things are changing. We do need to get back into some degree of regularity. So we've currently got a proposal that puts us into a new way of working. We're talking to the trade unions, talking to the staff, but we'll remove the early. It still gives us stagger, but those early starts, that 5 o'clock, so those starts will all go, and we'll move to more 6 o'clock starts.
Are all waste staff working, not the depot staff, but other waste officers, and we working with them still?
The majority of officers are working from the depots. They might have days where they'll spend the day at home if they're doing, reports and stuff. But most of the staff have been in their depots, right?
I just wanted finally, and this is not for you. Should I mention it? Yeah. One of the key developments in the last 20-25 years was the introduction of environmental wardens back in the day when we had devolved budgets. They're all gone now. They're all gone. We have,
yes.
Yeah. I think that was just as the police have community engagement officers. It's such a critical service
somehow we need community engagement officers that work in the patches in those key departments. And I've had discussions with the chief executive about this because it's not unique to refuge. It's just that your service touches every household. And I just think that is something that would assist in everybody understanding and appreciating what's required from residents and from staffing perspective.
I agree. But what we can see, what we're hearing from our crews, is that we need to do some more work with everybody, with partners, residents, to understand what's going on.
And I remember the strike settlement, which was all about that.
It is, and the crew can do so much, and they work. And we are looking at a suite of posters and leaflets that will help, and bin certificates, not just for garden, but for also to remind people what they can put in. But through the neighbourhoods at homes committee, we have been looking at fly tipping, and within the fly tipping, we've got 6 targeted wards where we've got community enforcement engagement officers looking at fly tipping and all the issues, but really looking at what rubbish is on the street. Okay? We've targeted the top 6 worst performing wards for fly tipping and rubbish on the street. In fact, we're seeing what impact they have, and that might be the start of those.
There was a refuge guy from housing who was doing fly tipping on a housing estate that brought his stuff and dumped it in the HRC so he could carry on without going back to the depot. That was his. Yeah. Well, I thought it was sensible. He said that we need more CCTV. He said, because I'm sick and tired of going to the same places every week to pick up fly tipping. It's clearly, we need to enforce far more than we do. And I'm going to bring Liz in. Liz.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Darren. It's to come back to those roles on the crews, the grade 3 roles, the waste prevention and awareness officers. I'm really just interested to know what outcomes you're getting from them, because I do think they're crucial for all the reasons that Carla's outlined and you've acknowledged. And I also, I'm just reflecting on some of the things that we recommended, in 2019 in the plastic-free Birmingham inquiry about the need for better, simpler to understand information for residents. I think again, there's a big need to focus on that as we move hopefully out of the pandemic, because I think people are still very confused about what they can and can't present for recycling, especially for things like Tetra Packs and coffee pods, which are taken in other council areas, and particularly in some neighbouring authorities. And then the final question I've got for you. I've previously visited the Veolia Education Centre at Tyseley. That's excellent, and I want to start making that known to schools in my ward, to do some work with kids. And is that open at the moment? Because I looked on the website and it's still got the note saying that it's closed because of the pandemic. So if you could just answer on those things, please, Darren.
Yeah, no problem. The work of the worker on the back of the wagon is still really important. It's still a critical role, and it provides the data. So it's getting that level of data. So they're recording levels of contamination, they're recording all sorts of issues that are happening on that street. So where we, and it's again, if you look at the map that I put up with the blue dots for miscollections on assisted collections, we've got the same, so we can target interventions on particular roads based on the work goes we're doing. So rather than say the whole ward is struggling with recycling, we know the individual roads, and we are working on a suite of information that we can work with residents. So to give the worker that interaction a lot more. We had to pull that back really with the physical knocking on doors through COVID. But as we start to move out of that, we've been continuing to record the roads and the particular, and in some cases, it's not the whole road, we're almost down to this particular area, this particular ward, this particular part of the road that is constantly struggling. And then we need to work with that group of residents or that street to understand why they're struggling, and information and briefing on our website and in the literature we can provide to residents is crucial on that. And we've been allocated somebody within the comms team to look at that data. Veolia got some brilliant educational stuff, so you can follow a piece of plastic through the MRF on a video clip all the way to a recycled data. And we need to pinch that really and get it into BCC as well.
Yes.
Veolia are starting to reopen some of those initiatives. They've just opened the reuse centre at St James's Road, and I know that they are looking at restarting those education programs, which is so important. So I'll speak to Veolia and get data when that resource will be.
Okay, I think that'll be useful. Again, it's engagement and education is something, but I still think, there are some hardcore fly tippers out there, and private landlords are some of the worst. And they dump a mattress, and before you know it, certain parts of my ward, it's grown into a bigger, which is where the selective licensing will allow us to hopefully do more of that educational and enforcement work, because I think the private landlords have got a lot. There are some good ones, but okay. Can I thank you all very much today? I think it's been fascinating and interesting, and this dialogue helps us to understand and appreciate the challenges, but also to challenge you in being the voice of the people of the city through our representation role, that to hold you to account for what is a fundamentally basic service of Birmingham City Council. So thank you all very much indeed for
And I
attending.
can say, Chair, and can I thank you, Wendy, because they are now actually using our subject lines, so that when we get our emails, I'm not having to say, you get an extra here, I'm obvious what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, I sent you.
My biggest book.
I sent Wendy one yesterday because somebody said, thanks for your inquiry. And I didn't know which one it was. The idea that I do one a day. I wish.
Yeah, no, I think
It's not a lot better.
It is better, but there must be new staff, I guess. I don't know.
I wish it was.
Oh, right, okay.
But we were able to drill down to where the problem.
I just need a name and a street. That's all I need.
We've had the same with reference and.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I need to have a quick word with you after about your role in parks.
Roman.
Yeah, that's exactly on the reservoir, so just,
I can tell you about that.
okay. It's bird flu, and this cruel man is stopping the rowers and the sailors from using Edgbaston Reservoir. And we've had no outbreaks at the centre, but there you are. Anyway, I'm going to have a chat with you about that. The attached work programmes have a discussion by the committee. Does anybody want to have a discussion about item 6, the work programme? I trust all the respective chairs to do their roles and to, anything you wish to say?
Well, just to let the chairs know that the Scrutiny business report for council will be circulated by Kerry later this afternoon. So there'll be a few questions and a few information requests coming through from Kerry. And just to let you know that in addition to the council business report going to the March City Council meeting, there will be the council access inquiry. So this to bring the coordinating committee up to date with those 2 bits of information.
Liz, is that a historic hand or a new one?
It's a new one. It was just to say that Christian has organised a meeting for me just after this. It's also going to be online, but to discuss some issues about consultation on cabinet reports before they actually go to cabinet, and that's particularly from the point of view of doing a sustainability assessment on them, which is part of the response to the climate emergency and our Route to Zero action plan. But I also want, in the business report, are we going to be making any recommendations about the scope of scrutiny committees? Because I just feel that the areas of work that sustainability and transport cover are so massive, particularly given that the growth in the work that we need to do on responding to climate change, that possibly we need to think about the remit of all the committees in the round, particularly in view of coming into the next municipal year and a possibility for any constitutional amendments. Obviously, that's all if we're all lucky enough to be, those of us that want to are lucky enough to be re-elected, but I just hope we're going to give that some thought.
Yeah, we're not going to raise it at the council meeting in March. I've already raised it with the leader, that we do need to just have a look at it. But we are going to look at it in April, our April meeting. We've got an annual review of the scrutiny framework, so we're going to look at, that's going to be our opportunity to have a look to see whether we need to tinker any of the portfolios of respective committees. Yeah. So
Okay, thanks.
Okay, date and time of next meeting is the 11th of March at 10 a.m. Request for call-ins, none. Other urgent business, I haven't got any authority to act. Thank you very much. I hope we all cope with Storm Eunice very well indeed. It's okay in the city centre at the moment.
Well, I'm watching a big pine tree.